All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. So I got a really excellent video here for everybody today. I'm going to try and make it as quick as I can. I'm going to aim for under 30 minutes because I have to go somewhere. I've tried to make this video like 3 times in the last few days. But anyways, so I got a nice little presentation. I've typed it up of the key points I'm going to say to help speed things up and make it more neat and efficient for the viewer, right? And partly the other reason why is because this really is a simple concept, but because I have to read a number of verses, for the viewer, if you listen to the talk plus the verses, your mind's like scrambled by the end of it. Even me, like when I read through it or watch through it, right? So I thought long and hard how I can make a nice little neat, precise presentation for everybody. Because the concept is very, very simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the concept up front, right? Now, the revelations here are astounding. And I have to say that this, in conjunction with everything else that I've discovered so far, I am utterly convinced that biblically it has to happen in 2024. Okay, or maybe just after, like at the start of 2025 or something. I'm not going to fuss over a little bit of difference, right? But it's got to happen soon, right? And like I've said before, I mean, you could pin it down to, well, maybe the Bible says it will happen, maybe the Bible's not true, right? But like I've said before, in the prophecy of Daniel alone, not to mention all the other prophecies, but in Daniel's great prophecy alone, he detailed like a dozen different key major historical events, like the biggest events that had ever happened to Israel and some of the largest world historical events to ever take place. He foretold them and even said the exact, through his numbers and everything from God, foretold the exact digit year that they would take place in, right? And out of the 12 events that he foretold, 11 of them all took, like in order from first to 11th, all took place in the exact digit year that he said. Okay. I mean, the astronomical impossibility of these things being anything other than a divine miracle in true prophecy. I mean, you know what I mean? It's got to be real. And the last of the 12 is Jesus returning to the earth, right? So if all the other things came true, the very last thing is going to come true. And according to Daniel specifically, it pinpoints 2024, right? So, like I've said before, I've had my book out on Amazon for a year now. I urge you to go get it. It's only $11.11, right? In this book, this should be in every Christian's bookshelf, right? It should be taught in every church. It should be in every Christian's brain because these are 7 biblical prophecies, 7 prophecies in the Bible where God told us a period of time, gave us a number for how long that period would be, and each of these 7 prophecies prove when the end of days would come, and it's 2024. Okay, so those are 7 astounding prophecies. Now, one of those 7 is what I'm talking about here today, right? So if you're interested in this topic, you want to have it in hard copy or whatever, it's in here. It's chapter 3, right? I've expanded upon it a bit for this presentation. Okay, so there are other astronomical pieces of evidence for 2024. This is just something else on top, right? This is just part of the package, so keep that in mind, right? But the basic gist of what I'm going to cover here, and I have my little presentation with all the verses, right? I'll do it in a split second, but the basic gist of it is that there are verses in the Bible, and even from Jesus' own mouth, that tell us, okay, that once, after Jesus was here, okay, once he died, once he left, there would be 2,000 years, okay, called 2 watches, which would transpire, and then Jesus would return at the start of the 3rd. Okay, this is what was told to us. And I'm going to share the little study here with everybody, this little short presentation. It's going to blow your mind because I knew these things before, like I mentioned them in that chapter in my book, right? But I was like, anyways, the way I presented it here, it's nothing extra, nothing new on top of anything I've said before, right? But I wanted to present it in a way where it's provable to everybody, like methodical, step by step, like scientific approach. You know what I mean? Step by step, like building blocks. So here we go, right? There isn't too much verses to read. So here we go, right? I'll just read it from the start, read my notes as I have it, and hopefully I won't have to interject and add more. So as I'll prove with this presentation, and these are just short notes, right? I didn't write to be fancy, right? But as I'll prove with this presentation and by the verses, it was revealed to us in the scripture, both in the Old and the New Testament, that Jesus would return to earth with the end days arrival after a period of 2,000 years, like I just said, that he would arrive at the start of the third watch and third millennia after 2 watches and 2 millennia had passed. The year 26 AD of his death corresponds to the cup of wrath prophecies I cover in my book and in my videos on my channel, as it marked the end of 999 years of Israel's disobedience and marked the start of Israel's 1,998 years of double punishment, which indeed finish on the day Christ returns in 2024, as per the prophecies detailed in the book of Revelation. Okay? Also, the year 23 AD of his baptism, being 3 years before when he died, corresponds to the 2 days of God, being the 2 watches, the 2,000 years that would transpire until 2024. Okay, from his appointing as Messiah in 23 until his return 2,000 years later in 2024. Okay, that's from the perspective of, his appointing as Messiah, the days of God, and the watches. Okay, but if you're talking about the perspective of the cups of wrath, which I spoke about in great detail for an hour in my other video the other day, I talked about in the book as well. Okay, in regards to the disobedience of Israel, this is a different thing, a different perspective, a whole different topic, right? So even though the numbers are astonishingly similar, it's because they're 100% related to one another. They're just 2 different things. So I'm saying this to clarify so people don't get confused, right? From his baptism until his return is 2,000 years. That's the 2 days of God. That's 2 watches. From his death, which was a couple years later, 26 AD, until his return is 1,998. However, this period is exactly double of the length of time in which Israel disobeyed God, okay, which ended with the death of Jesus, okay, and it started with the end of King Solomon's reign, because King David and King Solomon were the first 2 righteous kings. And then after Solomon, you had Rehoboam, who was the first evil king of many to come. Okay, in that long period of disobedience, meticulously added, is 999 years, culminating in the year Jesus died. Okay, for that period of punishment, as per our prophecy in Isaiah, which I cover in my book, okay, God foretold that God prescribed to them double punishment, a double cup of wrath. Okay, in the book of Revelation, we see that this cup of wrath is finishing being poured out upon Israel, and the last drops are poured out basically on the day Christ arrives. I'm not trying to pinpoint the drop hits before Jesus comes, but on the day Christ arrives, the last drops are poured out or have been poured out. And that period of time is 1,998 years from his death until 2024. That's exactly double 999. Okay, so that's the overall framework for everything here. Okay, so anyways, what we start off with is Psalm 90 as the cornerstone. Okay, because this is a verse that Judaism and Christianity both hold with prophetic significance. Later in Psalm 90, it's got verses pertaining to the end of days, but I don't need to read that for this part. But in verse 4, it says, "For 1,000 years in thine eyes are as yesterday." Okay, so everybody has understood this to mean that a day with God is like 1,000 years. And for Christians in the New Testament, we have other verses like from Peter, which affirm this further. 1,000 years is like a day to God. Okay, so, but the thing that everybody overlooks is what it says at the final half of that sentence. It says, "For 1,000 years in thine eyes are as yesterday, for it passeth on, yea, a watch by night." So what it's doing is it's classifying that 1,000 years, which is a day unto God, is a watch. Okay, so this is a unit. It's called a watch. And you have to remember that because that's key for what I'm about to present here. Now, the next cornerstone verse we're going to start with, because it's basically the premise and context for everything here, is Hosea 6:2. Okay, now in Hosea 6:2, again, this is a verse that both Judaism and Christianity hold with prophetic significance. Okay, and it says, "He does revive us after 2 days. In the 3rd day, he does raise us up, and we live before him." So Christians and Judaism both believe that this is a prophetic allusion towards when the resurrection, meaning when God and Messiah arrive at the end of days and cause the resurrection and the judgment and all that. It's going to be after a period of 2 days. Now, we know from Psalm 90 that I just read that a day is like 1,000 years. So that's your reason right there in 2 verses. There'll be 2,000 years, and then he comes at the start of the 3rd. So Judaism and Christianity have understood that, premise for a very long time. So this common ground everybody already knows. Okay, this is the amazing thing. Okay, so I'll just continue reading my short notes in the verses. Okay, now the following verse, Luke 13:32, spoken by Jesus, has been overlooked by everybody, but it's clearly a secret being revealed. Okay, now I'll just read. It says, and he said to them, Jesus said to them, having gone, say to this fox, lo, I cast forth demons and perfect cures today and tomorrow. That's 2 days. And the third day I am being perfected. Now you might say, oh, there's lots of verses in the New Testament that say that, oh, he'll rise on the third day and this and that there. There's like 12 or 20 verses. I mean, I lost track counting them. There's a ton of them that talk about he will be risen on the third day, or, different terminology, but he'll be dead 2 days, rise on the third. Lots of those verses. But this one here is different, because if you stop and actually read it, we know that when Jesus died and was crucified, he was dead 2 days. He was walking around the world curing people. What did Jesus say here in Luke 13? He said, having gone, say to this fox, lo, I cast forth demons and perfect cures today and tomorrow. So he's doing things on those 2 days, and on the third day he is being perfected. So even though it sounds like all those other verses that say he'll be risen on the third day and all that, it's not talking about that. This is talking about something else. It's talking about the context and the whole framework of 2 days, and then everything is perfected on the third. So it's the same framework as the Hosea prophecy. Okay? And if we apply the principle of 1,000 years as a day, like we get from Psalm 90 and elsewhere, what Jesus is saying is that after 2,000 years, on the third day, he is being perfected. Okay? So there you go. That's clearly a reference. That's clearly Jesus referencing Hosea's prophecy. Okay? And that's significant too, because Jesus then tells us in the following verses about him arriving at a third watch. Okay? Which would signify after 2,000 years, he will arrive. Okay? So I'll read my short notes. The following verse, which is Luke 12, actually shows that Jesus specifically said that there would be 3 watches. Okay? Thus, 3 periods of 1,000 years. Because, like I said again from Psalm 90, 1,000 years is a watch, right? That's what it says. So the 3 periods of 1,000 years, which is yet again another allusion to Hosea's prophecy. Okay? And thus also specifying that he will come in the third watch. So this is what he says in this next verse, Luke 12, right? And in these verses from Luke 12, Jesus also clearly instructs us. He instructs us to watch for the duration of each watch, which logically could only indirectly mean that he wants us to measure out to know the 2,000-year period so that we can be prepared for his return at the start of the third. And it also proves that he does not exclusively come in only a second watch, because he also mentions that he may come in the third, or that he will come in the third. Okay? And because a third watch is also stated, logically you can ascertain that he will not just come in exclusively just the second watch, because he said that he would be coming in a third. Okay? So from this logic, and knowing that Jesus will not come twice, we can see that clearly logic shows us he's coming in the third watch. He mentioned the second watch to help show us that there are 2 watches before he comes. That's the only reason why he mentions that. Okay? That's the only reason why. The whole point of him coming in the third watch is to signify he comes after 2,000 years. Okay, so in Luke 12, verses 36 to 40, it says, and be like to men waiting for their Lord. And again, this is very important to mention. This is a direct connection to Daniel 12. Again, one of the penultimate 7 prophecies I cover in the book. And in Daniel 12, in the final verse in Daniel's whole book, okay, God tells Daniel, blessed is he who waiteth earnestly, okay, to come to the days, years, the 1335th, because you will go onto your lot at the end of days. Okay, it's one of a few places, you could count them on one hand, where God uses the term end of days. Might only be like 3 or 4 in the whole Bible. Okay, that's one of them. And God is literally telling us when it's going to happen, how long it's going to be until it happens, and he gives us an instruction. Blessed is he who waiteth earnestly, counting those days to come to the final one, counting those years. Okay, so that's an instruction from God. Doesn't get more penultimate as an example in this category and setting, right? And then when you apply that understanding to this here, where he says, and be like to men waiting for their Lord, well, blessed is he who's waiting earnestly, right? And knowing and counting the days. Well, be like to men waiting for their Lord. So in like fashion, right? When he shall return out of the wedding feast, that he, Jesus, having come and knocked, immediately they, the people, may open to him. So if you have no clue when Jesus is coming, and suddenly he appears and knocks at your door, you have no clue when he's going to be ready. Can you imagine if you're having people over for Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner or something, and they just show up at your door at random, like you didn't even make plans with them, like you have no clue when they're coming. It's just knock, knock, knock. You might not even be at your house. You might be down the road at a restaurant. You know what I mean? If you know when he's coming, you might not know the exact hour. You just know, okay, yeah, the family's going to come up and visit me on Christmas Day at some point. Oh, knock, knock, knock on the door. Okay, well, yeah, go let him in. You know what I mean? There you go. That makes sense. But when you have no clue when he's coming, then you can't immediately let him in. But anyways, going on, it says, right? So be like to men waiting for the Lord when he shall return out of the wedding feast, that he having come and knocked, immediately they may open to him. Happy those servants whom the Lord having come shall find watching. Verily I say to you that he will gird himself and will cause them to recline, and having come near, will minister to them. And if he may come in the second watch, and in the third watch he may come. So that's where he's saying there's three watches, right? He's named them, the second and the third watch, and he's suggesting that he could come in the second or the third. We know he doesn't come twice, so he's going to come in the second or the third. And like I said, use logic. He's not going to come in the second after mentioning a third, that he could come in a third, right? He's coming in the third because that lines up with all the other stuff we just talked about. Hosea's prophecy. Okay, it lines up with the fox prophecy that Jesus mentioned, that after 2 days will be perfected on the third. So it lines up with all those things, right? So, but it says right here, and if you may come in the second watch, and in the third watch you may come and may find it so. Find it so is a direct reference to finding them watching. So if we know a watch is 1,000 years, we know that there's 2 watches before he returns. That's 2,000 years we have to be watching. Nobody lives for 2,000 years because he wants humankind to know the maths, to know when he's coming, and to all know as mankind to know how long it is until then. Not just like the individual, but he wants everybody to know that, right? He wants everybody to be watching because one person can't watch, an individual can't watch for 2,000 years. That's my point. Right? The implication is that the hope and implication is that everybody will be watching, right? But like it says, right? If you may find it so, having come on the third watch, right? Happy are those servants. And this know that if the master of the house, and that's that remark regards us or even Satan, you could say, whoever's on the earth, right? That if the master of the house had known what hour the thief does come, he would have watched. It would not have suffered his house to be broken through. Now, don't get confused with this allegory. It's calling Jesus a thief because apparently he comes out of the blue and you have no clue when he's coming. It's like your family's coming over for dinner, but you have no clue that they're coming and they just knock at the door. You might not even be home. That situation, right? That's when he comes like a thief, even though Jesus isn't a thief. He comes like a thief. And it says that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief does come, he would have watched. So what does that tell you? If you know when Jesus is supposed to come and you're watching like you've been instructed and waiting earnestly, then he won't catch you by surprise like a thief. That's going to be affirmed in verses I'm going to read later, explicitly affirmed. Okay? The Christian churches have taught a fallacy and a lie for a very long time that we cannot know when he comes. We are supposed to know when he comes. He blatantly told us, right? So, but anyways, this is just a hint for what's coming later, what I got lower down the page, right? But it says right here, if the master of the house had known what hour the thief does come, he would have watched. It would not have suffered his house to be broken through. And ye then, become ye ready, because at the hour ye think not the Son of Man does come. Now, anyways, the reason I read those verses is because that's where Jesus says that there's a second and a third watch, i.e. there are 3 watches. And it's implying, obviously, logically, he's coming on the third watch after 2 watches, which lines up with Hosea and lines up with the fox prophecy from Jesus, like I said. Okay, so moving on. The next point is the following verse from Matthew 24 reaffirms that God is using these measures of times, these watches, which are periods of 1,000 years. So in Matthew 24, verse 43, it says, In this know that if the master of the house, same thing, had known in what watch the thief does come, he had watched and not suffered his house to be broken through. Because of this also become ye ready, because in what hour ye think not the Son of Man does come. So here it actually specifies, if you had known what watch the thief does come. Well, Jesus, the thief in this analogy, he's told us what watch he comes in. He's coming in the third. Okay? He's coming in the third. So we know what watch he's going to come in. So that's the interesting thing. So, anyways, going on, right? Now, the next amazing thing is that Jesus, and I have this in my book, and I have many videos on this as well, but in the parable of Gethsemane, okay, Jesus revealed something amazing that everybody's overlooked. Okay, so I'll just read my short notes here. Jesus also gave us the Gethsemane parable of 2 watches before his third and final arrival. So the very same framework I'm talking about. The Gethsemane parable actually reveals that Jesus comes on the 3rd watch, after 2 watches. Okay, and if you're not familiar with this, if you've never read my book or watched my videos, you wouldn't have heard it anywhere else because nobody else recognized this. But Jesus says the same, he does the same thing 3 times. And the process of what's occurring is he's with his disciples at first, tells them, wait and watch. He goes away and says a prayer. In that prayer, he's asking God, I'm going to give the cup, which is the cup of wrath, which is due to be poured upon Israel. He's giving it over to God. They were about to kill him, and he was handing the cup of wrath over to God. They kill him, marking the end of 999 years of disobedience. That cup of wrath is then poured out upon Israel, okay, right after the death of the Messiah. And they go into exile, they lose everything for that 1,998 years, which is double of 999, and it culminates at 2024, okay? So that's the essence of the Gethsemane parable. What happened was that he told them to wait and watch. He went away and said that prayer about the cup of wrath. When he came back, they had fallen asleep, so he rebuked them. This happened twice in a row. For 2 watches, the people failed and were asleep and slumbering and not ready. He then came on a 3rd and final watch, okay, in which is the final judgment. Okay, so this is the order of what he set out there in the Gethsemane parable that everybody's overlooked. It's the same framework that we see in the Hosea prophecy and in the Fox prophecy, okay, and in that verse I just read there from Jesus, right, which was Luke, okay, about the 3rd watch. So here we have, 4 references to Jesus coming in the 3rd watch, which means after 2,000 years, okay, it's very, very clear, okay, so going on, like I claimed, right, those who don't know when Jesus is coming, and those who aren't watching, who aren't waiting earnestly, like we are instructed, will be caught by surprise by Jesus as if by a thief. Okay? Here is Jesus with his own mouth saying it in Revelation 3:3. Okay? Remember then how thou hast received and heard, and be keeping and reform. If then thou mayest not watch, I will come upon thee as a thief, and thou mayest not know what hour I will come upon thee. So, what Jesus actually said here is that if you don't watch for my arrival, if you don't watch for the time I arrive, you don't know when I'm coming, you'll be caught by surprise. Now, that's obvious. If you're waiting at the airport for your friend to come in on a flight, but you don't know what airplane he's on, you don't even know what day he's coming, you have no clue. You might not even know a week or month he's coming. You just know generally that he's coming. What are you going to do? Sit in the airport all the time? You can't watch. But if you know when he's coming, you could sit in the airport lobby, look at the board, and watch for his flight number, watch for his flight arrival time, and wait for him when he comes off the plane, right? That's sensible. That makes sense. What Jesus said here is, if you don't watch, I will catch you by surprise like a thief, and you won't know what hour I come upon thee. So when you take that verse that's from Jesus' own mouth and you apply it to those other few verses in the New Testament where it says where you won't know the hour and he'll come upon us like a thief, you have to understand those who have no clue, who are clueless, unaware, not watching, okay, not waiting, who aren't ready, those clueless ones who are slumbering will be caught by surprise as if by a thief, and they won't know the hour. Why? Because they're not educating themselves and preparing themselves. That's what the scripture reveals. The scripture does not say that everybody will not know the hour, and that an hour doesn't mean literally the time on the clock hour, right? But The scripture does not say that we won't know the hour. It says that the people who are slumbering and ignorant won't know the hour. That's literally it, because Jesus just said so. If you don't watch, I will catch you by surprise, as if by a thief, and then you won't know what hour I catch, that I come upon you. So what that means is that if you do watch, this is just reading the inverse of what he said. This is what's directly implied by what Jesus said, is that if you do watch, I will not come upon you as a thief, and you will know what hour I am coming. Okay? So this is confirmed in 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 1 through 6. And look how beautiful this is. Man, I couldn't even make this up. Right? It says, and concerning the times and seasons, brethren, ye have no need of my writing to you, for yourselves have known thoroughly that the day of the Lord as a thief in the night does so come. For when they may say peace and surety, then sudden destruction does stand by them, as the travail does her who is with child, and they shall not escape. So he's talking about how you're going to have this sudden arrival. You're not going to have 7 years tribulation like this church lie says, right? You're going to have a sudden arrival. People are going to be living their normal, happy lives, and then bam. That's why I love this verse. One reason I love it. The next reason is it starts off saying concerning the times and seasons that he doesn't even need to write to the people, because obviously everybody knew these things back then, and people just forgot it over time, right? So even back then, they probably knew that there'd be 2,000 years until Jesus returning, right? So anyways, that's why he says, concerning the times and seasons, brethren, ye have no need of my writing to you, for you yourselves have known thoroughly at the day of the Lord, as the thief in the night does so come. But listen to what he says next, right? He says, and ye, brethren, are not in darkness. He's talking to the Christians. He says, and ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day may catch you as a thief. All ye are sons of light and sons of day. We are not of night nor of darkness. So then we may not sleep as also the others, but we may watch and be sober. So here's Paul talking to his fellow Christians about the times and the seasons, saying that they already know it all. He doesn't need to write them about it. And he says that they know when Jesus is returning and that they won't be caught by surprise. It's the ones who are ignorant, who are asleep, who all those other verses apply to. They're the ones who are going to be caught by surprise. When Jesus comes like a thief, it's upon those who weren't watching and ready and knowing when he was returning. That's the beauty of it. That is the stellar, crystal clear, 100% factual truth. Okay? No church could twist it any other way. That is 100% the scriptural truth right there. Okay? We are supposed to know when he's coming, and he told us when he's coming. Is after the 2,000 years. Okay? Specifically from his death, 1,998, because that's the double cup of wrath that was being poured out on Israel. Okay? His death marked the end of 999 years of disobedience, and then the cup of wrath was handed over from him, hence the Gethsemane parable, where he repeated it 3 times, handed over that cup of wrath to God. God poured the cup of wrath on Israel right after Jesus died. As soon as Jesus died, that wrath started pouring out. The sun went into darkness. The earthquake shook the land. And then from that point there, Israel fell. The temple fell just 40 years later. They went into a near 2,000-year exile. And Israel was only reborn, according to the prophecies of Daniel, in 1948. Okay? So you can't make this stuff up, right? You really can't. But don't forget those verses I just mentioned there, that we should know when it's coming. That way we won't be caught by surprise. So in Luke 21:36, in like fashion, it says, watch ye then in every season. Same word as before, right? He said, concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need of me writing to you, because we know when Jesus is coming. In Luke 21 here, he says, watch ye then in every season, because they know when he's supposed to come. And this is him telling future Christians, look, we know when he's going to come after 2,000 years. So watch in every season. And for you in the later generation, when it's your turn, you're the ones who are going to be there for when Jesus returns. You also should be watching, right? That's the point of that statement. Watch ye then in every season, praying that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that are about to come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man. And amazingly, in Luke 12:45, it says, for those of you who claim to not know when Jesus returns, this is what happens to you. And if that servant may say in his heart, my Lord does delay to come, and may begin to beat the men servants and the maid servants to eat, to drink, and be drunken, the Lord of that servant will come in a day in which he does not look for him, and in an hour that he does not know, and will cut him off. In his portion with the unfaithful he will appoint. And that servant, who having known his Lord's will, which was to know and get ready and watch for the arrival, but that servant, having known his Lord's will, and not having prepared, nor having gone according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. Okay? So these are all the people who say, oh, we don't know when Jesus is coming back. He's just taking a long time. They don't know about 2,000 years. They don't believe the 2,000 years. They just say, we can't know when he's coming back. So you got two people, somebody who knows that he's coming in 2024 or just after 2024. Then you got somebody who says, I have no clue. Nobody can know. Which person does this verse apply to? If that servant may say in his heart, my Lord does delay to come. Well, to someone who believes and understands the 2,000-year principle, you could ask them 2,000 years ago. They would say, oh, well, Jesus revealed after 2,000 years he would come. It's working according to God's divine week. He's coming at the end of the 6th day to usher in the start of the 7th, the millennial rest. They knew this thousands of years ago, right? But people today, the churches today, being polluted by everything, saying you can't know when he comes, that's who these verses are applying to. Those of you who have no clue when he's coming and you're not being prepared. You might not know when he's coming, but if you're righteous, then it may not matter. But the average person, not righteous. So you do have something to worry about, right? So we're supposed to know. We're supposed to know. But anyways, now the following is going pretty deep. Let me just check my time real quick, actually. 31 minutes. It's not too bad. I'll see how quickly I can read this because I got to go somewhere. Now, the following is deep. I don't need to include it in here, but some people like going extra deep. But this also further confirms in like fashion that Jesus comes at the start of the third watch, as the third watch corresponds to, as I'll explain, the watch of night phase of the 8 daily watches within a 24-hour watch period. So an earthly day of 24 hours is divided into watches. So at nighttime, when shepherds would go out to watch their flocks, you'd have these divisions, these watch periods that they go out for, 3 hours each, 8 in a day. There's 4 watches that correspond for the evening, for the night. Depends on the buzzwords you use, right? Because in English, in the West, we call it night and day and this and that there. That gets confusing when you think like that, right? But one half of the day has 4, the other half of the day has 4, right? So nighttime has 4, daytime has 4, right? But the way they are termed is as follows, right? So what we'll get here is from, okay, why didn't you say that? That's maybe overcomplicated, right? So I'll just go on reading my short notes. When I waffle, it adds too much time, right? So as I'll explain, the third watch that Jesus will be arriving in, and remember, don't get confused, those watches are 1,000-year watches, right? But the third watch corresponds to the watch of night, evening, of the 8 daily watches where 24 hours is divided within, okay? So when we go in, so basically every 3-hour period, right? So you have, doesn't matter where you start, right? 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., right? So we're going to start at the evening. Okay, you could call this evening. I think they call it night or evening in the ancient context, right? But whatever you want to call it. Today we call night anything that's not day, right? So that's why I said it can get confusing with wordplay, right? But from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. would be that first watch. And again, I don't know which one is counted biblically as first, second, third. That doesn't matter here. This talk, you'll see what I mean. That's irrelevant in this context, right? But just to give people a brief example, right? 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., right, is a watch of 3 hours, an earthly day watch of 3 hours. And this would correspond to dusk, when the sun's starting to go down, generally, because it changes throughout the year and depends where you live on the earth, but generally speaking, right? And then from 9 p.m. until midnight would be the next one, okay? And then from midnight to 3 a.m. is the next one. And then from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. is the next one. Then 6 a.m. to noon is the next one. Then from noon to 3 p.m., then 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., then the cycle repeats with the 8th, which is 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. again. So you have 8 divisions of 3 hours. 8 times 3 is 24, okay? So that's the cycles of the watches, right? So if the shepherd's going out to watch his flock at night, there's 4 periods of watches, okay? But what we're told from all these prophecies so far, Jesus comes at the start of the third watch after 2 watches are finished, okay? So that's the important stuff to keep in your mind. Now, we know that when Jesus died, He died at midday, at noon. Now notice this. I was going deep last night, right? Jesus died at noon, and the sun went dark for what? It says for 3 hours, right? Which is the length of an earthly day watch. So this corresponds to his light being snuffed out instead of being allowed to spread as foretold. Remember, Jesus was supposed to be the light to the nations. He didn't get to go do all that because he got rejected and killed. Because he was the light that got snuffed out. God was like, oh, you want to snuff out his light? I'm going to snuff out your light. So boom, as soon as he died, the sun got snuffed out. Okay, there you go. One thing I noticed, right? And also noon is peak daylight time scientifically. So if God was going to pick a time of day to make an ironic point to people, oh, that's the time you got the most daylight. Well, not anymore. Poof. You know what I mean? There you go. Next thing I mentioned is that this period of 3 hours of darkness corresponds to that which starts at the this one here. Sorry, you can't see the chart that I created, right? How could I read this? This period of 3 hours of darkness corresponds to that period which starts at 26 AD to, or is it? Oh, 1026 AD. So that's the first watch. So after Jesus died in 26 AD, you have that first watch, 1000 years, that ends 1026 AD. Okay? And not to overcomplicate things, I'll leave it to be better explained with other videos already done and in my book. But his baptism was 23 AD. Like I said, from there, if you take the 2000 exact measure, that culminates 2024. If you're taking it from his death, that corresponds to the cup of wrath prophecy. Slightly different perspective here. And that's why you have 999, because that's the actual length of time from the end of King Solomon till the death of King Solomon's reign to the death of Jesus, 999. Double wrath punishment, double cup of wrath punishment times 2 is 1998. That terminates in 2024. So slightly different perspectives, virtually the exact same length of time. There's only 2 years difference. That 2 year difference comes in the lapse between his baptism and his death. Okay, so there's no discrepancies. This is 100% kosher in all ways, but I'm just reiterating that because some people might get a little bit confused. Okay, so like I was saying, the period of 3 hours of darkness when Jesus died on the cross at midday corresponds to the first watch. So if you're breaking down the watches in terms of these earthly day watches, so we have 8. So what we're saying is that if every 3 hour watch, and I'm doing this because the 3 hour period is called a watch, you have 4 watches at night, which means it's broken down into 3 hours. Okay, so if each of these earthly day watches are to be corresponded to the 1000 year watches, that's what I'm doing here. Okay, so which watch did Jesus die on? Jesus died on the earthly day watch that corresponds to the time that he did die. Jesus died at midday, at noon. This means that he died at the start of, and I don't know the precise numbering, it's arbitrary, right? But the 6th watch. Okay, I started it at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. I started the day with evening. Okay, I think that's what they do in Judaism, right? So 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. I counted that one as the first. So in that arbitrary numbering, the 6 would be from noon until 3 p.m. Okay, so in that 6 watch, that number being arbitrary, from noon to 3 p.m. is the 3 hour period of the day. That's the watch period of the day in which Jesus was dead for. And if we're to correspond that earth day watch to 1000 divine day watch, okay, then we have to look at 1000 years and then 1000 years, and we'll have the watch in which Jesus arrives. Okay, so from noon to 3 p.m. would be from 26 AD to 1026 AD, or if you're looking at the baptism point, it'd be from 23 until 1023. Okay, depends if you're looking at it from the Israel cup of wrath perspective, in Israel and the punishment of Israel perspective, which uses the death date of 26, or if you look at it in terms of 1000-year watch whole periods, that's being taken from his baptism. So from his baptism until his return. Okay, so 2 different contexts. It's virtually the same 2000-year period anyway. So if you want to simplify it, doesn't matter if you simplify it in your mind, right? For your own sake. So noon to 3 p.m. is the first 1000 years, then 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. is the second 1000 year period. That would mean that he would arrive at 6 p.m. in this sense, okay, in this context. Okay, so comparison context. So that watch phase from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. is the start of evening, the start of night. Okay, and I believe biblically they use the term night for this phase. So that would suggest that in this sense, Jesus comes at night. This is not saying that literally Jesus will come at night. And also, it's always half night on earth and half day somewhere else on earth. So he can't just come at night, anyways. But in this beautiful and poetic scriptural sense, Jesus, it has been revealed, will be coming at the night or evening watch phase of the daily cycle, of the earthly daily cycle. The crazy thing is that there are verses that confirm this. In Mark 13:35, it says, "Watch ye therefore, for ye have not known when the Lord of the house does come, at evening, or at midnight, or at cock crowing, or at the morning." I use this verse because that breaks down the 4 different watch phases for the earthly day. Okay, evening, night. Okay, midnight, cock crowing, 3 a.m., or at the morning, 6 a.m. Okay, now in Luke 17:34, it says, "I say to you, in that night there shall be 2 men on one couch, the one shall be taken, the other shall be left." Everybody overlooks this, but here's a verse that says that Jesus arrives and the rapture happens at night. Now, it's not literal. This can be directly, perfectly applied to what I just explained. He comes in that night watch phase, right? So this is actually, as I explained, backing up and revealing corroborating that he comes on the 3rd watch after 2,000 years. Because literally, the night watch phase is after 2 watches from when he died. That's what I just broke down. He died at noon, okay? And that phase is from noon to 3 p.m. After that 1,000 years went by, and the next 1,000 years went by, we're at the phase of 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., which is evening, okay? Night, depending on what you want to call it, evening. It's not midnight. That's the next one, okay? Night, evening. So that is the 3rd watch. The 3rd divine watch on the earthly scale corresponds to, in regards to after Jesus' death, evening watch, night watch, okay? And here we have Luke 17 saying, in that night, that's a confirmation that he's coming in the 3rd watch. Okay? In Matthew 25:6, in the middle of the night, a cry was made, "Lo, the bridegroom does come, go ye forth to meet him." Now, it does say middle of the night, but it doesn't say midnight. Okay? But again, we have night here. Okay? And in 1 Thessalonians 5:2, it says, "For yourselves have known thoroughly that the day of the Lord as a thief in the night does so come." And there's plenty of those, right? So we have all these illusions that he's coming at night. We know that it's not literal because it's never just night everywhere. And you know what I mean? We know it's not literal. And if it's poetic, how is it applicable to anything? Well, it would be directly applicable in what I just explained. He's coming in the night watch, the evening watch phase of the earthly day. And this is precisely 2 watches, 2 earthly watch phases after the watch phase in which he died. Okay? Which is the direct same parallel template to him coming on the 3rd watch after 2 watches transpire, which the prophecy of Hosea talked about. Jesus's Fox prophecy statement talks about. Jesus mentions in the chapter of Luke where he says he'll come on the 3rd watch, okay? And where Jesus reveals that he'll come on the 3rd watch in his Gethsemane parable, okay? So that's that 4, I might have miscounted with the finger, 4 or 5 places where it's specified. I don't think this one here is potent enough to say it's like hardcore evidence that he comes on the 3rd watch. But I mean, that's pretty interesting. I went deep, I digested it, and it still lines up. You know what I mean? It wasn't off by a watch. It lines up with it. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. So anyways, we have our proof here. Jesus is definitely coming after 2,000 years, folks. Okay. And the other thing that I didn't get into there, sorry, I just closed the document, is we hear from in the book of Revelation that Satan will be in prison for 1,000 years. And it's the 1,000 years before the end of days, the final day. We know this for a fact because when Satan is released, he immediately goes and kills the 2 witnesses. They're only dead for 3 days before Jesus returns and resurrects them, and they ascend up with everybody else. 3 days before the end is when Satan is released. So Satan was put in prison 1,000 years ago, whether you like it or not. No Christian church teaches this because they're oblivious. But when you apply common sense, That's what it is. Satan was put in prison 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago was 1023 AD. Okay, there was a massive earthquake in the Dome of the Rock region, and it destroyed the Dome of the Rock and had to be rebuilt in 1015, just before this. And 1023 is when Satan was put into the abyss for 1,000 years. He'll be released 3 days before Jesus arrives. Okay, and he's going to wreak havoc during those 3 days. He'll kill the two witnesses and wreak havoc across the world for 3 days. He'll gather the armies of Gog and Magog, like it says, to go mount up for war against Israel. And once they've surrounded Israel and start attacking it, that's when God and Jesus arrive with the seventh trumpet, folks. Okay, so that's all that there. Anyways, I gotta get going. I forgot what I was going to say, but it's for the better because the video is too long as it is. So take care, folks. Let me read these comments real quick. I just want the end to come. So, you know what I mean? That's what I would like. I want to be. I just want it to happen. I've waited a long time. I've been waiting like 15, 20 years for this. So anyways, take care, folks, and God bless. See you all later.